When we say like 1 in 50 people has autism, that autism looks so different for every single person.
So autism is obviously a spectrum, and it can be little impact. It can have a little impact on the child and the family up to a really, really large impact, right? That can include things like not being able to communicate vocally and trying to figure out other communication methods for them to have a way to communicate. It can include things like being really aggressive, feeding difficulties, sleeping difficulties, all these other things, obviously including the social impact that it can have on social relationships.
Really the two characteristics now that the diagnostic manual is looking at is the social communication deficits. And so they've combined those, social and communication, because we have people with autism who have a ton of communication, right? And really their language, their ability to converse and speak is not much different from another person that doesn't have autism, but the social piece of that is difficult for them, right? They're not picking up on cues. They have trouble with talking about things outside of kind of their wheelhouse, and so that social communication piece is really big. And then the second component of that is the restrictive and repetitive patterns of behavior. And so that's where we get when people think autism, they think things like hand flapping and stuff like that. And so that falls into that category, but that can be so diverse, right? We have like restrictive eating, we have restrictive, like I only want to stop at the gas station and I'll only get gas out of pump number 5. Those two kind of things. And then when we say it's a spectrum, like it's really like this gradient of in all areas of life. I can be highly skilled in one area and then have really minimal to no skills in another area. And that makes autism interesting to me. But that can make it really difficult to treat because when I train, I do a lot of teacher training, and I say there's not a magic wand. There's not a, oh, you have autism, here's the magic wand that you need. Each person is so different that their intervention has to look really different.
Working with a lot of families who are first face that original diagnosis of autism. When they first get that diagnosis for their child, they're glad that they know what this is and that maybe there's a name or a title and there's support services that are going to help with that. But they also wonder, so what does this mean for my child? Does this mean that they're not going to live independently? Does this mean that they're always going to be here? I'm going to be supporting them or have somebody to support them long after I can? And what does that mean for our entire family as to whether or not we have siblings who are maybe neurotypical and this one isn't? Or maybe this is our first kid, and so does this mean any other kids, because we wanted to have a big family, would also have autism? All of these things come to mind, and there's a lot of fear and concern and worry. Then you realize quickly that your support around you may not be equipped to help you either. And so that can feel very isolating. And the things they're trying to tell you to do just don't work with your kid, and now you know why, but you don't know what to do.
When they get that diagnosis, I think kind of the first question is like, what do we do? And so the families are so just overwhelmed with like, I don't know what to do next. And all of the avenues are just overwhelming, right? Like I've got to figure out what to do with school. I've got to figure out all these medical issues that we're dealing with. I've got to figure out if we need private speech, OT, PT, ABA, thinking about the future, thinking about tomorrow, thinking about the next hour of my life is really overwhelming. Our kids and teenagers and adults who are more severely impacted by autism, it can be a very rough road for them without a community that's aware that when somebody says there's a child with autism missing, like we gotta go and we gotta go now. These families live in more fear if they don't have that kind of support system. So our families who have grandparents on board, aunts and uncles, therapists, teachers, friends who are like in the trenches with them, not completely, but it reduces their stress a little bit. It allows them to still be parents and not be literally everything for their child.
And so having somebody who can help you through that initial just maze of diagnosis can make a huge difference, to just wrap around you and connect you to resources, explain things, answer questions, introduce you to other people who are walking that walk. If you end up having a relative or a friend or somebody who gets this diagnosis of autism, a great way that you can support them is just look in your community around them. What are autism resources for them? And maybe be willing to go with them, and then also be willing to learn about their child through a new lens. Because the autism perspective is a very different perspective. They process all information and input through their senses in a drastically different way. So many times in the community, you'll find a child who's screaming or throwing this huge tantrum, and you might realize that they're actually a really large child. You know, the disadvantage with autism is they don't come with a label, a sign, or a physical disability that you can see to understand why there's a struggle going on. The thing with autism is that the only way individuals are going to learn how to manage a store is that they have to go through it, and they have to figure out how to cope through it. And so that means it going badly and then learning how to do it well, and that taking repetition and practice. And so the bravest thing that a mom with an autistic child can do is take them to the store and take them out in the community and have their child fail, knowing they're gonna fail, and support them through it and teach them how to do that. And that's incredibly painful when you have the community then coming to you and judging you for that, because maybe your child's 8 years old and they're throwing a tantrum like a 2-year-old. The best thing you can do is just smile at them, and you could ask, is there anything I can do to support? But don't just call the police on them, because they may be a warrior who's fighting for their child.
I think that the best thing that can be done is offer an invitation, right? Either and know, like, offer choices to the families of like, hey, we would love to do XYZ. Would it be easier for you to come to our house, for us to come to your house, for us to meet somewhere? Like, thinking about things like things that we never think about, like, is there a great playground that has a fence that we could go, like, hey, I found this playground, it has a fence, let's go there. And then just being understanding that, like, that trip to the playground's gonna look a little bit different than it does with your friend who has a child that doesn't have autism, you know, and it may mean that it's shorter, it may mean that we have to leave early, it may mean that, you know, mom has to get up and down, or you have to walk, you know, walk around the playground and monitor while you chat. Really, like, what our parents need is support, and when they don't have support, they become so isolated that they, like, it's amazing to me that some of these parents continue to do what they do.
We all need purpose, and how we gain purpose is by getting out there and doing for others. And so that is a huge part of humanity, and it's a huge part of serving our adults with autism, is giving them purpose. If you are a family who is newly facing autism, don't remain isolated. There are so many resources out there that we want to connect you here in East Texas to a community of families and people that are walking this walk with you. You're not alone, and there's no reason to walk this alone. We are here to support. And if you're not sure how to connect in, come out to the Tyler Run for Autism, or call TLC or Elijah's Retreat or Champions for Children. All these different organizations are here connected with each other to support you and introduce you to other families.